The final item of business today is a members' business debate on motion number 4327 in the name of John Scott on British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly autumn plenary. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and I would be grateful if those members who wish to speak in the debate could press the request to speak buttons as soon as possible, and I call on John Scott to open the debate. 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And it's my privilege to be able to open this debate in my capacity as the leader of the Scottish Parliament delegation to the British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly. As members may be aware, the British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly, or BIPA, was initially established as the British-Irish Interparliamentary Body, with the first meeting being held in London in 1990, when the Constitution was agreed and the first plenary session was held. Originally, the body consisted of 25 members of the UK Parliament and 25 members of the Irish Parliament. In 2001, following the 1998 Good Friday Agreement and the establishment of the British-Irish Council to foster further dialogue between governments in the British Isles, the membership of the body was enlarged to include representatives of the legislatures in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, the Isle of Man, Guernsey and Jersey, with Scotland having 5 members of the enlarged 68-member Assembly. And in 2008, the name British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly was adopted to reflect the new era of relations between Britain and Ireland following the signing of the St Andrews Day Agreement in 2006. And while the connections between the peoples of the British Isles are clearly close and long-standing, the same, sadly, could not always have been said of their political representatives. So the creation of BIPA has provided an arena not only for parliamentarians to pursue a peaceful political dialogue regarding issues in the north of Ireland, building upon the foundations laid by the peace process, but also a forum for parliamentarians from across the British Isles to discuss topics of mutual concern and promote cooperation between us all. So the recent meeting of BIPA in plenary session in Glasgow was only the second occasion that the plenary has been held in Scotland, and it was a great pleasure to welcome colleagues from across the British Isles and to showcase the quality of hospitality that the City of Glasgow and indeed Scotland offers. The plenary session was focused on the topics of the Scottish economy and on Scottish-Irish relations. A wide range of speakers addressed the plenary, including Fergus Ewing, our own Minister for Energy, Enterprise and Tourism, Theresa Villiers, MP, Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Graham Smith from the STUC, Graham Riddle from Visit Scotland and Ian McMillan of the CBI. And the plenary session also provided an opportunity to engage with the Irish diaspora organisations in Scotland, who also attended the dinner, which was hosted by the Deputy Provost of Glasgow City Council, Gerald Leonard, and which was addressed by the presiding officer. And can I say what a wonderful setting Glasgow City Chambers was for this occasion, and on behalf of all the Scottish Parliamentary delegation, thank the Deputy Lord Provost for the generous welcome and hospitality that he provided. And I can see from looking around the chamber that there are members present who have had an involvement in BIPA during previous sessions of Parliament, as well as my colleagues in BIPA in the current session, who are Willie Colfie, Alison McInnes, Michael McMahon and Mary Scanlon, and with past members from all parties, including Ian Smith, Bruce Crawford, Hugh Henry, Robin Harper and Murray Tosh, to name but a few. And at the Glasgow plenary, we were very pleased to welcome James Dornan as well, currently one of our associates. So I look forward to hearing from colleagues during this debate with regard to their experiences of involvement in BIPA and views on how the Assembly can develop. And while the initial impetus for the establishment of BIPA arose out of the Northern Ireland peace process and encouraging dialogue between parliamentarians who had previously had little contact or in common, it is my view that BIPA has moved on from these beginnings to focus on issues which can bring tangible benefits to all our constituents, notably in the fields of transport, connections, energy and economic development. In addition to my role on the BIPA Steering Committee, members of the Scottish Parliament delegation are actively involved in 3 of the 4 BIPA committees, which deal with European issues, economic affairs and environment and social affairs. And these committees have recently been working on a range of reports, including the small and medium enterprise sector, the Irish community in Britain and human trafficking. And these committees meet at different times from the plenary session, as well on occasion during the plenary session. Now, BIPA committees' reports are sent by the BIPA Secretariat to the governments represented on the British Irish Council. And the committee reports are invaluable in that they provide short, focused analysis of a particular issue. And increasingly, we are looking, that's we in BIPA, are looking to disseminate the findings of these committee reports to our own parliaments and parliamentary committees to supplement the work carried out in all of the parliaments and assemblies across the British Isles. Also, the location of the British Irish Council offices in Edinburgh is emblematic of the key role that members of this Parliament can play in fostering greater cooperation, not only between parliamentarians across the British Isles, but also in terms of relations with the British Irish Council itself. And lastly, can I close by noting that following the BIPA plenary in Dublin in May this year, that both the Dáil and the House of Commons held debates in their respective chambers to discuss the outcomes of the plenary session. And that is why I am therefore delighted that we are having this debate today, following the Glasgow plenary, and look forward to future debates in this chamber following BIPA plenary sessions. Thank you.
Thank you. I call Willie Coffey to be followed by Michael McMahon. Speeches of 4 minutes, please.
Thanks very much, Presiding Officer. My thanks and congratulations, of course, to our Deputy Presiding Officer, John Scott, for bringing the work of the Assembly to the attention of the Parliament. BIPA, or the British Irish Parliamentary Assembly, wasn't exactly on my radar until I was asked to join it last year. With a body having such a diversity of political interests, it seemed to me at first that what we might get would be an assembly of the middle ground, offering recommendations to please everyone and achieving very little. But nothing could be further from the truth. The members who attend this assembly are certainly not slow in representing their views, but they have shown a determination to understand and find common ground with their colleagues, no matter their politics. This is quite an achievement when you consider the origins of the Assembly, established in 1990 to help further the peace process. Presiding Officer, my view, even after only my first 3 plenary sessions, is that this Assembly is doing some fantastic work, and the members and support staff who make it all possible are to be congratulated. Under the excellent leadership of Joe McHugh, TD, and Lawrence Robertson, MP, the co-chairs seem to be able to put together business agendas that certainly offer members the opportunity to engage directly on issues of importance. And last month in Glasgow was a very welcome opportunity to look at the Scottish economy and Irish-Scottish relations. As well as keynote contributions from, as John Scott mentioned, Theresa Villiers, Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, and from Fergus Ewan, our Minister for Energy, Enterprise and Tourism. We also had additional contributions, I think, from Ailish Ford and Jane Robertson from Diageo. I think it would be fair to say that there was considerable interest in what the speakers had to say, and all of the sessions, as far as I recall, ran over time due to the numbers of members wishing to raise points of interest. Clearly, there's a keen interest in what is happening in Scotland, not just from our Irish colleagues, but also from our counterparts in the UK Parliament, as well as the Channel Islands, Isle of Man, Jersey and Guernsey. Mrs Villiers did make the point that her support for Northern Ireland to be given control of corporation tax, but was equally adamant that any further devolutionary changes in Scotland would be put on ice until the independence referendum, and that certainly caused some discussion in the Assembly that particular morning. Mr Ewing took a number of questions from a variety of delegates, including one from our own Deputy Presiding Officer, and I think it would be fair to say that he spoke with great enthusiasm about Scotland, the huge potential for renewable energy, our shared interests with Ireland and our prospects for the future. Interestingly, we also heard from Sir William Mackay on the age-old West Lothian question, which, if I have to be perfectly honest, I think flew over the heads of the majority of the delegates who attended. Presiding Officer, the BIPA Assembly is an excellent forum that brings together people with polar opposite political views, but at the same time allows those members to come together in common purpose when the opportunity comes their way. So far, my experience, firstly in Brighton as a guest of our UK Parliament hosts, was first class, then followed by a memorable visit to Dublin, where the Assembly was addressed by Taoiseach Enda Kenny and later hosted by President Michael D. Higgins. But where, other than in Glasgow perhaps, in the famous Curlers on Wyers Road, would it be possible to slip in unnoticed with members from the UK House of Lords, senators from Shannon Erin, TDs from the Dáil, Sinn Féin and Ulster Unionists from the Northern Ireland Assembly to spend some time together, but crucially to develop a closer understanding and to maintain friendships that are now well established? Glasgow indeed offered our colleagues a very warm welcome and left a great impression. So I'm very much looking forward, Presiding Officer, to further engagement with colleagues in the Assembly, and thanks once again to our own staff in the Scottish Parliament who work so hard to make these occasions such a success. Gaurav and Tholiv, Veki Meshiv, Inun and Gaul. Best wishes and see you in Donegal.
Thank you. I now call Michael McMahon to be followed by Mary Scanlon.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And can I also congratulate John Scott on bringing this debate to the Parliament, and I hope that in future, just like in other jurisdictions like Westminster and the Dáil, it's not a members' debate in future, something that John has had to use members' time to have, but something that actually gets built into the programme of the Parliament, because I think the work of the British Irish Parliamentary Assembly is becoming much more important and should become an integral part of the debate and discussions that we have in this place. I first became involved in BIPA when it was the British Irish Inter-Parliamentary Body, more commonly known as the Body. It was as an associate member that I first became involved in the Body, and I was frustrated at that time because, while being a substitute or an associate member meant that I could participate in the debates at the plenary sessions and was able to hear a vast array of speakers from a whole host of different jurisdictions speaking on important matters. It was the ongoing work of the committees that I felt frustrated I couldn't continue to follow through on that work. To hear the work of the committees being reported back to the plenary, but not to be able to engage in that and to get involved and take the work forward, was a bit of a frustration, especially if you had a particular interest in those subjects. So being a full member of BIPA, it now allows me to participate on an ongoing basis with the committee that I'm currently involved in on environment and social issues, Committee D. But what the development of BIPA from the Body is a good news story. I do have some criticisms about my early experiences of the Body, because although Wally Coffey is absolutely right, there is a social dimension to what goes on, and meeting with colleagues from other jurisdictions in a social setting can be beneficial to building up good relations. I felt initially that was the focus of the Body. There was too much emphasis on that. You can't say that about BIPA now. It is a much more substantial institution, and the elected representatives who've got us to this point deserve great credit for taking what was a very almost talking shop type attitude out of the discussions and bringing forward much more important, substantive and substantial issues. While I understand that the Body, as it was, had to walk before it could run, and in the initial stages in the post-Anglo-Irish Agreement days, a lot of the issues were pretty tortuous, and there was a lot of trepidation and a lot of finessing and caressing of political issues at that time, and things were pretty difficult. And it's to the great credit of the MPs, TDs and others who were involved in those initial days that the Body played such a huge role in bringing together and helping to move forward the peace process. But BIPA did serve its purpose well, and I can now move on, I think, into discussing in a much more constructive and substantive way economic, social and political issues. And I think it is starting to do that. And it's because I'm now involved in the committees that I feel as though that it's become more central to the work of the plenaries, and much more involves the other members in things as we move forward. When I first went on to Committee D, they had just completed the substantive report on the relations between the British and Irish diaspora. And although I had some criticisms of that report, it is a very useful report. We've gone on to look at a very short report on flooding, which I think has helped inform the other jurisdictions. And I'm just back last night from Belfast, where we've had the latest leg of our inquiry into human trafficking. And that has been a really important piece of work, and we'll be in Edinburgh in January talking about that again. So we have to congratulate all those involved in BIPA. It is a very important organisation. I'm delighted to be a part of it, and I look forward in the years ahead to continuing to put some effort in to try and identify areas that we can work together across the British Isles so that we all benefit from one another's knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you. And I now call Mary Scanlon.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I would also like to thank my colleague John Scott for securing this debate, and I would join him in acknowledging the hospitality and indeed the splendour of Glasgow City Chambers. I would also say I agree with Michael McMahon's point, given that Westminster, I think Stormont and also the Oireachtas had BIPA debates in full plenary sessions. I think it's also appropriate that this Parliament do the same in future. But like Willie Coffey, I have to say that I was also not too familiar with the British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly until it was mentioned by a minister in response to a member's business relating to Irish people living in Scotland. I was asked to speak in that debate as my mother came from Donegal and, like many others, settled in Scotland. I'm proud of my Donegal roots and equally those of my father, who was born and bred here in Scotland. I've now attended 3 sessions of the BIPA, with the first one in the Grand Hotel in Brighton, when I was placed beside a Sinn Féin delegate for dinner, then the Dublin meeting, and of course last month in Glasgow. I commend the work done by the co-chairs Lawrence Robertson, MP for Tewkesbury, and Joe McHugh, Fine Gael TD from Donegal. John Scott mentioned the development of the BIPA to 2008, but I would also like to add, Presiding Officer, that this is an important development, as no other body across these islands brings together parliamentarians from all these different administrations and indeed from such a variety of political backgrounds. For me, the address by the Taoiseach, Enda Kenny in Dublin, has been one of my highlights to date. As a previous member of the BIPA, he spoke of the experience of the developments between our countries. He described the Queen's visit to Ireland as groundbreaking, momentous and unique, as well as a turning point in British-Irish relations. The focus at the BIPA meetings is on working together, building trust, forging relationships and developing understanding between parliamentarians from all the islands. Over €1 billion of trade crosses the Irish Sea every week, and Ireland's exports to the UK increased by over €600 million in the year of 2011 alone. Exports from Ireland to the UK are greater than Irish exports to Brazil, Russia, India and China put together. And in turn, Ireland is the United Kingdom's 5th largest export market. So not only are there greater economic benefits from working closely, but in the energy sector there is much to be gained from interconnectors and shared research and development of marine energy. More is now being done to share health services between the north and south of Ireland, as well as access to specialist services for people living in Ireland, services in the UK. As a member of Committee C, we had an update on wave and tidal energy from Neil Kermode of EMEC at the meeting in Glasgow, and energy will be the focus of our next meeting in Donegal, which is midway through the Irish presidency of the EU. As John Scott said, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland gave an address in Glasgow. This was followed by a robust question session. Current and future issues were discussed, as well as several from the past. This was conducted in a manner respectful to all. Other debates, as Willie said, included the West Lothian question. I actually fully enjoyed, I found most interesting, the debate led by Frank Feehan, TD, who spoke of the decade of commemoration, referring to the period from 2012 to 2022, which shaped the history of British-Irish relations until the present day. And whilst we are likely to focus on the Great War from 2014 to 18 and also Bannockburn, this was also a historically unique period in Irish history, with the Third Home Rule Bill in 1914, Ulster Covenant 1912, outbreak of the First World War, Representation of the People Act, giving the franchise to women over 30, the establishment of the Irish Free State, and so much more. I think I could sum up by saying the joint statement by Prime Minister David Cameron and the Taoiseach in March this year says it all for me. 2012 marks the beginning of a decade of centenary commemorations of events that have helped to shape our political destinies. This series of commemoration offers us an opportunity to explore and reflect on key episodes of our past. We will do so in a spirit of historical accuracy, inclusiveness and reconciliation. I think that's what the BIP is all about. So it has to be better, Presiding Officer, to build good relations with trusted neighbours and work together to our mutual advantage for the sake of all the people living in Scotland, England, Wales, Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, Isle of Man, Guernsey and Jersey. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I now ask the Cabinet Secretary to respond to the debate? Fiona Hislop, Cabinet Secretary, you have 7 minutes.
I'm glad to have the opportunity, Deputy Presiding Officer, as part of this debate to comment on the valuable work of the British Irish Parliamentary Assembly and to recognise that Glasgow is the venue for the 45th plenary session of the British Irish Parliamentary Assembly and that the agenda had such a strong Scottish theme. The First Minister, who is himself a former member of BIPA, wrote at the time welcoming the Assembly to Scotland and offering his best wishes for a lively and productive plenary session. My colleague, Mr Ewing, addressed the Assembly and has told me how successful the event was, and the report suggests that the sessions were certainly lively, and certainly from the contributions from Michael McMahon, William Coffey, John Scott and Mary Scanlon, I think they have reflected that very well in their speeches. And I was particularly interested to see the comments afterwards of the co-chairman of the Assembly, Lawrence Robertson MP, and Joe McHugh TD, who said that while the discussions that took place on Scottish efforts to boost trade and tourism provided much food for thought for members of the other parliaments and assemblies in attendance, the overriding issue of the 2014 referendum on Scottish independence had dominated the plenary. They added that while the referendum debate would clearly continue to dominate public discourse in Scotland for the next 2 years, it was important that the Assembly maintained its focus on building economic links and policies between administrations to aid recovery and boost employment and trade. And I thought Mary Scanlon was very accurate in recognising the value of exports with the Irish economy in particular, and she may be pleased to know that only last month I attended the British Irish Chamber of Commerce event as part of the promotion of those relationships. The Assembly, of course, exemplifies how we, the elected representatives of the people of these islands, can collaborate to tackle the major social and economic issues that transcend our borders, irrespective of our different political perspectives. And while previously the Assembly focused on issues regarding the peace process, it is testament to the efforts of the people of these islands, as well as groups like BIPA, that members now have a greater focus on working together to build economic links between our islands. That is not to say that the role of the BIPA plays in the peace process has concluded. Indeed, I would encourage members to remember the genesis of BIPA and be sensitive to that when considering its activities and future plans. The murder on the 1st of November of Northern Ireland prison officer David Black served as a stark reminder that security issues will remain on the agenda for British-Irish relations for some time to come, but it also demonstrates the need for vigilance and attention to the Good Friday Agreement and issues affecting peace, reconciliation and progress in Northern Ireland. And the fact that representatives from all administrations, the UK, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, Guernsey, Jersey and the Isle of Man attend BIPA adds much to the work of the Assembly. And as I know from my role in representing Scotland in the British Irish Council, we each face many of the same problems. The difficulties and challenges we have to overcome, especially in such challenging economic times, are often very similar, and it is essential that we cooperate with and learn from each other as we seek to overcome them. Now, in that regard, the BIC, which is the intergovernmental body, has agreed to share information on the various work streams more proactively with BIPA. Presiding Officer, by sharing our experiences, we can learn from each other, helping us not just as parliamentarians, but more importantly, making a difference for the people we represent. The willingness of BIPA members to encourage engagement and cooperation on matters of mutual interest and concern is of great benefit to us all. And this will be even more important for an independent Scotland, allowing us to continue to meet and discuss common interest with our BIC and BIPA counterparts as representatives of a sovereign Scotland. Now, may I end, Presiding Officer, by expressing my thanks to all those who worked so hard to make the Glasgow plenary a success, particularly the co-chairs, Lawrence Robertson and Joe McHugh TD. I look forward to hearing more about the next plenary in Donegal, which I understand will be discussing a joint energy strategy for Britain and Ireland, indeed an issue that the British Irish Council has spent much time and attention on. It is another issue which is of great interest to Scotland, about which we have much to contribute, but in terms of cooperation is probably one of the areas we can have most dynamic intervention. I was about to close, but Mary Scanlon.
Mary Scanlon. Mary Scanlon's microphone, please. Can I have Mary Scanlon's microphone, please?
There have been issues raised regarding working towards a closer relationship between the BIPA and the British Irish Council. Could the Minister confirm just how the British Irish Council will input into future discussions, particularly on energy, which is one area where we can work together to our mutual advantage?
Cabinet Secretary.
Mary Scanlon would be interested to know at the BIC summit in Dublin last January, which I attended, the Council charged the new BIC Standing Secretariat, referred to by John Scott as now being located in Edinburgh, with engaging with the BIPA Secretariat to discuss the implementations of those areas for improvement on which the BIC and BIPA agreed. That was set out in the letter sent by the BIC Secretariat to the BIPA Secretariat following the 2010 summit in Guernsey. I understand this work is ongoing, but certainly in terms of the work streams, there has been extensive work carried out between the different jurisdictions on energy in particular. It is a recurrent theme of the British Irish Council, and certainly in terms of seeking response from the BIPA Secretariat as to how that information can be shared. The willingness to engage is there. I do stress, however, I think it's important, and I endorse the view that there can be no suggestion that BIPA would be seen to hold the BIC to account. That is for the role, quite rightly, of the legislatures from which member administrations are drawn, not the role of BIPA. But in terms of some of the agenda items, whether it's human trafficking, as referred to by Michael McMahon, was an area which this Parliament has been very strongly involved, but also, I think, particularly in energy, we're starting to see the progression of where the relations, whether it be it through the Parliamentary Association or from the British Irish Council, the substantive issues that can help us proceed into decades to come in terms of renewable energy, but also in terms of social justice, can be claimed. Each experience is different. We're not saying it is the same. The solutions won't necessarily be the same. But by, for example, on youth employment, we can exchange ideas. I've already seen a testing of our own approaches, which can be informed by our closest neighbours around us. And that is, I think, the type of relationship that we want to foster. And that is why I think the role of individual parliamentarians in the BIPA, whether it's from this Parliament or from others, is really important, because we have to test ourselves just as much as you, as the parliamentarians here, have to test this government and what we do. Being better informed by other examples of what is happening, I think, can help us produce better policy solutions, because at the end of the day, it's the people that we serve that we have the opportunity and the privilege in this Parliament to represent, that really have to be the foremost of our thinking on this issue. I hope that explains some of the relationships, and I'm happy to engage with members on that in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes John Scott's debate on British Irish Parliamentary Assembly, and I now close this meeting of Parliament.